2:04 in the morning here on 107.6 FM, and I don't know who's left to listen, but if you can hear this, stay awake. That's not advice, it's survival. My name's Logan Cross, broadcasting from the back room of what used to be a community station in Brookvale, Pennsylvania. The front of the building's boarded over, the windows painted black. The only light in here comes from a single desk lamp running off an old marine battery, and I'm watching the needle on the voltmeter slide lower every hour. Outside, the air is heavy and still. The kind of warm, damp quiet that makes you feel like something's holding its breath right next to your ear. I'm here because the main grid went down days ago, and because the station's generator seized up on the second night. All I have left are these batteries, a rack of ancient vinyl I'll never play again, and this transmitter, which by some miracle still pushes a signal far enough to hit a few towns east of here. I keep the blinds shut, but sometimes I press my eye to the crack between the boards just to make sure the street's still empty. And most of the time, it is. That's the problem. You've probably noticed it yourself by now. People moving less, but not because they're gone. The first time you see it, you think you're catching somebody on their way to the store, maybe looking for their dog. The way they walk doesn't set off alarms at first. Slow, casual. But then you realize they're not blinking, or looking around, or reacting when a car door slams. They just move. One steady pace, all in the same direction. Like sleepwalkers heading for something only they can hear. I didn't think much of it the first night. A guy in a flannel coat wandered past my window just after midnight, bare feet slapping against the pavement. It was cold enough to see your breath, but his arms hung loose at his sides like he didn't even know they were there. He went straight down the street without looking at the pothole I knew would twist his ankle. Didn't trip though. Didn't stumble. The next day, there were two more. One of them, a woman I recognized from the coffee shop down the block. The one who used to give me an extra shot for free if she thought I looked tired. They moved the same way. Always toward the river. Now it's dozens, and they don't come back. Subscribe for more sleep stories. Appreciate the support. I've been piecing together what happened from the scraps of information still floating around on shortwave. Emergency bulletins with no context, fragments of police radio chatter, a voicemail left on the station's main line by some man whispering about the tone before his voice just stopped, not faded out, stopped, like he'd turned into stone mid-sentence. 3 days ago, I managed to raise an old friend of mine, Jules, who works maintenance at one of the regional relay towers. She was holed up in the transmitter shack at Mount Levis, and she'd been monitoring frequencies all week. She told me she'd found an anomaly, a constant low-frequency pulse embedded in the emergency signal bands. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. It's too low to hear, but equipment can pick it up. She said it started about an hour before the first reports of mass wandering events, as the news called them, and it hasn't stopped since. That's when I started thinking about the timeline. The power brownouts hit us last Thursday evening. Whole sections of the grid dropped for a few minutes at a time, then came back up. Cell coverage went in and out, and every time it came back, there was this moment where every phone in the room buzzed at once, even the ones turned off. People laughed it off. Some joked about an alien signal. Then came the first missing person reports. At first, it was just a handful, folks seen leaving their houses late at night and not returning. By Sunday, it was hundreds. By Monday, thousands. There's no official statement now. The last press conference was 4 days ago, and the governor looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She said it was a public safety matter, and urged people to remain indoors after dark. I could hear shouting in the background before they cut the feed. And then, nothing. No updates. No daily briefings. The state website's been offline since yesterday morning. I haven't seen my neighbors since Monday night. The last time I did, they were in the street. Marlene and her 2 teenage sons, standing perfectly still in the yellow light from the corner lamp. Their heads were all tilted the same way, toward the east, toward the sound I couldn't hear. They didn't move when I called their names, didn't move when I shouted. I almost went out there, almost touched her shoulder. But something in my gut told me if I did, I'd end up walking too. I've been staying awake with instant coffee and cold canned beans. I don't sleep more than 20 minutes at a time. The dreams are worse than being awake, because in the dreams, I'm out there with them, walking barefoot toward the river, my skin cold and my eyes open, but not seeing anything. When I wake up, I half expect to find myself halfway down the block. I've heard the word plague tossed around by the few shortwave voices I still pick up. Not in the sense of a fever or a rash, but something in the brain, something that overrides everything else. Hunger, fear, memory, and replaces it with that one quiet command: walk. There's talk of scientists in DC trying to isolate the cause, but the labs are going dark as fast as the cities. If it's biological, it's subtle. No coughing, no sores, no obvious signs until they're already gone inside. Jules thought it might not be a disease at all. She said the pulse could be doing something to the sleep cycle, forcing the brain into a state where it's awake enough to move, but shut down enough to obey. I don't know how that works, but I do know this. Every night, between midnight and dawn, the number of walkers goes up. And when the sun rises, there's never any fewer. The hardest part is knowing that some of them are still in there, somewhere. Their bodies keep moving, but maybe part of them is screaming to stop. Or maybe that's just me trying to make it easier to look at their faces. I'm going to keep broadcasting as long as I can, battery or no battery. If you can hear me, stay inside. Stay in the light. And most of all, don't follow them. No matter who you see out there, even if it's someone you love. It's now 3:11 in the morning on 107.6 FM, and the air has gone sticky and weird, like the whole town is breathing through a wet cloth. I can feel the humidity even with the windows sealed and taped, and the boards tacky with paint under my fingers. The temperature in here hasn't budged much since midnight. My analog thermometer says 68, but the pressure is dropping. I keep hearing the power lines outside groan, even though they've been dead since Monday. The transformer on the corner looks like a gray beehive that forgot it was supposed to hum. I don't like silence that acts like it's not silence. The street lamp at the far end of Maple tried to flicker a few times around 2:30, like some trapped charge was crawling along the guts of the grid, trying to make a last stand, but the light never held. It's just the kind of little movement that makes you think there's still a heartbeat in the world, and then it leaves, and you remember the body's cold. I'm going to talk about the night it hit, because I haven't yet, not start to finish. Thursday, 11:18 p.m. I was halfway through a rerun I'd cut earlier in the day, a dumb countdown show we used to fill dead hours. 20 songs from local bands who never got paid but wanted to be heard. At 11:19, the audio console started to click, not the speakers, the console itself, like fingers tapping the chassis from the inside. The meter overlays showed a pulse down low, sub-bass that shouldn't have been in the chain. I muted everything, and the needle kept answering something I couldn't hear. Outside, a Subaru rolled up to the four-way stop and never rolled again. The engine died like a cough that doesn't come back. The driver tried the key until the dash went black. From the back hall, one of our volunteer DJs, a kid named Theo, who always wore the same leather belt with stars pressed into it, asked if I'd messed with the limiter because the room felt like it was breathing. I swear to you, that's the exact word he used. Breathing. A loose pencil on the desk quivered, then spun sideways toward the east wall like the floor had tilted and then gone flat again. The phones lit at the same time. Even the landline we keep for nostalgia screamed like a fire alarm and printed one line of nonsense on the thermal paper. 3 numbers, a hyphen, an arrow, and a string of zeros. When I grabbed the receiver, all I heard was a slow beat, not a tone you could hum, just a push that made my molars ache. Theo put his hands on his ears and said he was dizzy. I felt it too, like the moment an elevator stops and your stomach keeps going. Except the drop didn't stop. When I stepped outside, the town was already slowing down. Cars bunched at the light, doors open, people standing in that blank way you only see in hospital hallways before bad news. A man on a bike coasted past, not pedaling, both feet down and skimming the asphalt like his brain had stopped sending the signal to lift them. A dog howled once, and then held its mouth open like it forgot what a howl was for. From the river, farther east, I heard a sound like wind through reeds, but there wasn't any wind. The trees were still. And then the walking started. First one man in a business shirt with his tie loose, then 2 kids in pajamas, then an old woman in slippers who used her left hand to lift her right foot over the curb, because her leg knew what to do, but only if she pulled the string herself, if that makes sense. Every one of them faced the same direction. No phones in hands, no talking, no breaks, no quick glances at a sound. I said, "Sir?" to the first man. He didn't blink. I said, "Hey," to the old woman, and she blinked once, a dry blink like a shutter that sticks, and kept going. The lights inside the diner went off like a breath you didn't notice was yours. After that, nothing was normal again. If you're just piecing this together on your end, if you're the last one awake in a farmhouse outside Lancaster, or in a 3rd-floor walk-up in York with a candle and a coffee cup and wet towels crammed at the door, here's what I've learned from anyone and anything still talking. It isn't just us. The shortwave bands I can still sweep aren't clean, but I've caught little shards. Someone outside Akron listing highways full of parked cars lined like dead fish. Somebody on the coast of Maine repeating a weather report in a flat voice because they don't know what else to do. A man near Asheville saying the walkers he saw moved uphill with their eyes on something past the rising ground, like gravity had a new direction. A woman in Dublin, yeah, across the ocean, I think it was real, said her mother left the house at 1 a.m. and walked straight to the Liffey, with her nightgown dragging and her hair full of sleep as if she'd gotten out of bed in a dream and never woke. I lost her signal after she said, I jumped in after her, and then nothing but the hiss. Maybe it's the same here and there. Maybe sleep doesn't mean what it used to mean. I promised I would keep this practical and not lose myself in fear. So listen close. The pulse, whatever it is, sits down low. You can't hear it with your ears. That's the trick. It's under you, not in front of you. If you have a cheap radio with a digital display and a signal strength bar, watch the bar during quiet. If the bar climbs in steady steps at night for no reason, you might be catching the push without the audio. If you've got a little battery speaker that throws bass, don't use it after midnight. Kill anything that vibrates floors or walls. Fans are okay if they make noise above a hum. White noise helps. Earplugs won't save you. That's not how this gets in. What does help is mass and space. Go somewhere with thick old walls. Schools with brick walls are better than new drywall houses. Church basements beat living rooms. Root cellars are best of all if you can breathe okay down there and you stay above the water line. I know how that sounds, like superstition, but it's not. I got a scrap of an email printed and shoved under our door 2 nights ago. Someone must have run by and slid it there during daylight. It was from a retired sleep tech named Donna from Hershey, who said the lab she used to work at had done studies on vibration and the brain's timing. Said slow waves can pull a sleeper deeper if you catch the wave at the right moment. She underlined right moment 3 times in blue pen. She wrote, "If the wave is strong enough and the head is still, the brain follows. So don't be still. Make your space prove you're alive. Sleep in short bursts with your head propped up, with something that scrapes a little. An old metal fan with a rattle, a clock with a loose hand that ticks and sticks and ticks again. If you have to sleep, set a wind-up timer to ring every 20 minutes. Move when it rings, even if every part of you hates it." Brookvale's water pressure dropped yesterday afternoon. I know this because I set a glass under the tap and watched it fill like a slow argument. The water tasted like coins. If you're lucky enough to have water, draw as much as you can and store it in anything that won't leach into it. Those of you in row houses with old claw-foot tubs, fill them, then lay a clean shower curtain over the surface to slow evaporation and dust. Boil anything you didn't watch come out of the pipe during daylight. If you live near a stream, don't go at night to collect water. And if you live near the big rivers, don't live near them at all anymore. I've walked to the end of Maple during the safe hours and looked east. The Susquehanna runs like a black belt across the land, and I swear the number of shoe prints turns into a smear as you get close, and after the smear there's nothing. Don't let the river call you just because it's the same direction the walkers face. If you need to cross it to find supplies or people, only do it when the sun is high, and only if you tether the most stubborn person in your group to the others so nobody forgets the way back. 2 roads out of town are blocked hard. Route 22 toward Harrisburg is a chain of stalled traffic bent like a spine, and 322 toward Lewistown has 3 overturned semis by the crest near the quarry. I climbed one during the day to see how far the jam went, and found melted chocolate spread under a ripped trailer like a brown lake. The driver was inside with his hand still on the wheel and his eyes open. He had tucked a rosary into the air vent. Not sure why that detail matters, but I'm trying to keep an honest record. A younger guy from the next cab over, Miguel Ortiz from York by the name on his license, had left a notebook on the dash with a list in block letters: bleach, candles, rice, coffee, real earplugs, and then the last line, "Tell Mama I'm fine." I put the notebook in my coat. I don't know where to send it, but I felt wrong leaving it open for sun and dust. If anybody out there knows a family in York that's missing a Miguel, who drives a blue Kenworth with a dent on the left side of the bumper, tell them he didn't look scared. He looked like he was holding a thing that was bigger than fear and heavier, but not ugly. I keep thinking about that. There are a lot of little bravery acts going on that nobody will ever get credit for. I know I said no callers, and I mean it. I won't patch live voices through. That's a rule now, because the lines do something to people if you sit with them pressed to your ear too long. But I will share what shows up in my mailbox down in the lobby, because during daylight, somebody keeps slipping envelopes under the crack with names written in lawn pencil, like the kind you use to mark seed rows. There was one yesterday, addressed to Logan, Radio Man, Maple and Fifth, from a public school custodian named Renee out of Lancaster, who stayed alone in an old brick school because the walls are thick and there's a hand pump in the basement nobody had used since 1973. She said she learned to replace the leather cup on the pump with a strip of belt when it cracked, something an elderly neighbor taught her 20 years ago. She wrote that, on the third night, she heard footsteps above her and saw through the cracks of the basement door a line of kids walking down the hall, silent, shoes squeaking a little, all headed toward the east exit. She followed them only as far as the threshold and watched them walk out into the parking lot in a neat line like a fire drill with no teacher. She wrote, "I put my back against the brick and did not cross the metal strip on the floor. I could feel that if I stepped past the strip, I wouldn't stop." She underlined that last sentence. She asked me to tell anyone listening that if you find an old school with a pump and brick, it's worth more than a new house with 12 outlets. And that if you find kids asleep in a classroom and it's nearly midnight, tie a string from their wrists to a desk leg, and tie one to your own wrist too. Because if one of you sits up and starts to walk, at least one other will wake in time to pull back. This is the advice of a custodian who cleaned gum off desks for 3 decades and never wanted to be in charge of anybody. Now she is, and she's doing it with string and a pump and a hallway she doesn't cross at night. Renee, if you can still hear me, I put your letter by the board so I'll remember your name when my head gets foggy. About the government, what I know is only what you know when the screen goes black, and the last thing it said was, "Stay indoors," in a font that looked like it didn't want to be the last thing. The EAS crawls I managed to catch on a little battery TV were loops, nothing new after Sunday. The NOAA weather broadcast out of State College used to be my cleanest signal for wind and rain. Now it runs the temperature and then stops mid-sentence. I've heard rumor from 2 separate voices on shortwave that the big guys pulled power from certain towers for safety, which I think means because the towers sing back at night and we don't like what they sing. There was a short press note read by a tired woman on an AM channel around Baltimore saying curfews don't work because the people who break them don't know they're breaking them. And then she said, "Go to higher ground and wait for daylight." And then there were 3 tones that hurt, and I spun the dial away. If something official breaks through with a plan, I will repeat it at the top of every hour. Until then, we are what we've always been when roads wash out, neighbors and hands and string and chalk arrows on the sidewalk. Theories. Everyone has one now, even the ones who say they don't. My friend Jules at Mount Levis gave me more than a theory. She gave me numbers before her battery died. She saw a sweep at 3.0 to 4.5 cycles per second blooming after midnight, riding under everything else like a riptide under light water. She said she recorded 30 seconds of it before the recorder crashed. She said it wasn't constant. It pulsed steady for 9 minutes, went quiet for 4, then came back, like someone was tapping a spoon on the edge of a glass in the same patient rhythm you use to put a baby to sleep. She said, maybe that's the point. It's not putting us to sleep. It's putting the parts of the brain that stop us from sleepwalking to sleep. The parts that say, no, stay. I'm not a scientist, but I trust Jules because she keeps towers less lonely. She hasn't answered in 2 days. Jules, if you're above the clouds with your little wire masts humming in your head, give me 1 click on the band at 5 past the hour, just so I know you're moving and not walking. The stores were a mess by Monday afternoon, but not shattered like in the movies. Just wrong. Pallets sitting in aisles, paper on the floor, shopping carts left in doorways like the last person who pushed them forgot what a door is for. The credit card machines never came back after the first stutter. People paid exact dollars and then with food to get different food. In the back of the hardware store, there's a shelf with kerosene lamps, and nobody took them because people forgot how good glass can be. I took one and left a note and 3 cans of soup with a rough tally. I am a thief now, in the exact way everybody was a thief in the blizzard of 1993, when we took bread from the closed gas station and brought it back the next week in cash with thanks. History is what you do when nobody's watching. Try to act like someone is. Small victories are what keep this station lit. An old guy named Henry, who used to work the farm supply over on Ridge, taught 2 teenagers from down the block how to make a hand crank from a rusted bike and an alternator, and now I have a trickle charge on the 2nd Marine battery so I can rest the 1st. One of the kids, Layla, found a box of blank cassettes in our archive and has been recording little messages from anyone who passes during daylight. Not voices, just names and last known addresses, and tell my sister I moved to the church basement by the soccer field. We log them in a binder like a cheap ledger for the end of the world. I keep the binder in a metal lockbox under the desk because paper will outlive every cloud backup we lost. And if someday we can hand this to someone who can carry it farther than we can, I want the names to go. I keep getting asked in notes what to do if someone in your house starts to drift. The answer is nothing easy. Wake them fast. Cold water on the face works better than shouting. Shake their shoulders, not their arms. Make them speak their own name out loud, and then make them speak yours. Make them solve something dumb like, "What's 3 plus 4?" And then make them sing the first line of a song you both know. If none of that works and their eyes fix to the east and their feet start to move and you feel the thread pull on your own legs too, you cannot go with them. Tie them to something heavy if you have to, the kind of heavy that would make your back hurt on a normal day. Leave a note on their chest in thick marker. You are loved. You come back when the sun is up. You come back even if your feet hurt. It sounds corny until you are the one reading it at dawn with rope burns on your wrists and your mouth full of someone else's name. And if the rope didn't hold and they're gone when you wake, you tape that note on the inside of your door so you see it before you touch the latch. I'm not telling you this because I read it in a book. I'm telling you because my sister called me on Saturday night to say she woke up on her porch with one shoe on and a bruise on her shoulder and a piece of duct tape stuck to her arm with those words written in her own handwriting. She lives across the river near Duncannon. I can't reach her since Monday, but I keep saying her name, Mara, and I keep saying mine, because names are little ropes too. Here's a thing that's hard to say, but it's true. There's a line between hope and risk, and it keeps moving. You have to move with it without letting it run you. I used to think I'd go out at dawn to check on everyone I loved and drag them home if I had to. Now I choose 1 block a day and 1 person who left a note, and I try to make their wish happen, and then I come back inside before the shadows reach the middle of the street. I hate that plan. I hate it so much I taste metal. But it's the plan that keeps the lamp on here and the transmitter warm. Radio housekeeping. If you hear this voice on 107.6 and the space between my words is clean, with no hiss, it's not me. I am not a clean signal anymore. I am the sound of a coil that's older than I am and a mic with a dent in the grill from when it fell in 2011. I have a scratch at the start of every hour because I bumped the desk reaching for the notebook. That scratch is your check. If you hear a message that asks you to leave your home and walk east at night to an assembly point, it's not coming from me, and it's not coming from anyone with skin and fear. If you need to reach me, write it and slide it under the lobby door during daylight. If you can't get here, tie your message to something that can roll. an empty paint can, a toy car, anything, and set it on the sidewalk an hour after sunrise. A woman named Paige from over on Willow did that yesterday with a note inside a tennis ball, and it made it halfway down the block on its own before it lodged in a crack. I saw it when I went out to dump water from the dehumidifier, and I brought it in. There are new postmen and postwomen now, and they don't have uniforms, and they don't take a paycheck, and they work from sunrise to noon, and then they become whoever they have to be to live. I don't know how big this is anymore. Earlier I said Dublin. I think I meant it because the voice had that round lilt that made C's feel less big. I caught a German number station click 3 times at 3 in the afternoon yesterday, and I haven't heard one of those since I was a kid, staying up too late near my grandpa's shortwave. I don't know if that means soldiers, or just somebody on a hill trying to make 3 clicks be a whole sentence. I do know that if you set a map on the table and put a pin in every note I've gotten that mentions where the walkers go, you'll get a soft line pointing toward water, toward low places, toward the wide mouth of the river where the land gives up. I don't think the ocean is a wall. I think it's a song that's too loud now. I need to tell you something that isn't a warning, so you can breathe. Yesterday noon, a pair of brothers from the end of Birch carried a windmill blade down the alley between the bakery and the tailor. Not a real windmill blade, an old sheet of tin and a bicycle wheel with spoons bolted to the rim. They planted it on a pipe that used to be part of the laundromat's vent and hooked the axle to a car alternator. It looked stupid, and I said so because sometimes my mouth is faster than my brain. And they laughed and said it was supposed to look stupid, that if it looked smart, someone would steal it. They got that thing to spin in the softest breeze. It whined like a kettle, and the needle on their meter twitched up, just a little. Enough to run a string of Christmas lights across their stairwell, so nobody trips in the dark and breaks a hip. That's what counts now. Tin and spoons, and a hallway that doesn't kill you. An old woman with a cane named Edna asked if the lights would make the walkers jealous, and the older brother said the walkers don't get jealous because jealousy takes a person inside to hold it. And silence fell around us for a long minute, where even the flies got tired. Then Edna told him how to grease the axle with bacon fat when oil runs out. I wrote it down like it was a chemical formula. It is, in a way. It's 3:44 now, and the sky outside the boards has that thin gray that says dawn is thinking about it. Dawn keeps its promises. Night makes new promises it never keeps. If you're fighting your eyelids right now, stand up and walk in a circle and say your name out loud. Say the names of the people you love, even if they can't hear you. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for the part of your brain that needs reminders that you belong to you. Drink water, even if it's warm. If you have instant coffee, don't be a hero. Use it now. If you're rationing, cut it with sugar and pretend it's a treat. If you're out of coffee, chew a peppermint or a clove or sunflower seeds, anything that wakes the mouth. I'll try to stay on until the sun pulls a full edge over the horizon. Then I'll kill the transmitter for an hour to let the battery rest, and to walk 2 blocks to check a note taped on the pharmacy door from a man named Tyler, who says he has insulin and wants to trade for D batteries and bleach. If you're within a mile, and you have D batteries, and you're steady on your feet after dawn, and you can bring one other person, help him. Take the bleach home for yourself because we have to make the world clean 1 square foot at a time, or it eats us. Leave a note if you can't find him. We won't do perfect. We'll do the next small thing and then the next. I keep a little ritual before I sign off each morning, and I haven't told you about it because it felt private. But nothing is private when people need each other. At first light, I open the back door, just a crack, and I hold a mirror out so the first sun of the day hits the mirror, and splashes on the ceiling above the console. I do it even if there are clouds because light finds a way around clouds. It always has. I watch the little patch wobble with my hand shake and then settle, and I say, I see you. I say it to myself and to anyone who might be walking back home with sore feet, and to anybody who's awake because they are too afraid to sleep. You can steal that ritual if you want. You can make your own. Tie a ribbon on your door when you make it through a night. Stack 3 stones by your steps. Look at the first ant you see in the morning and say, go. Tiny things need orders too. I'll be back at 5:30 if the charge holds. If it doesn't, I'll be at 7:10, and if not then, I'll be on the hour after that until the lead in this pencil is gone and the light can't find my mirror anymore. Stay inside. Stay in the light. Don't follow them. If your feet start to move, let your hands be smarter than your feet. Tie the string, write the note to yourself, and believe it. My name is Logan Cross. This is 107.6 FM from Brookvale, Pennsylvania, and the sun is coming. Hold on to something with your hands and say your name. I'll say mine with you until the scratch at the top of the hour tells you I'm still here. It's 5:41 a.m. on 107.6 FM, and I'm back on the air with the battery sitting just above half. The sun's been up for 20 minutes, and the light outside is the thin kind, white at the edges, yellow in the middle, barely strong enough to burn off the night's damp. I cracked the back door a few minutes ago for air, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. The air's been stale and metallic for days, but this morning it carried a faint sweetness, like cut grass or wilted flowers left in water too long. I don't know if it's the river or the rain that's supposed to come later, but it makes me uneasy because it doesn't belong to this season. The street is empty, but emptiness isn't the same as safe. The pavement's wet, not from rain, but from the slow drip of condensation coming off the rooftops and awnings. Every surface looks slick, and the colors are wrong. The brick on the corner pharmacy has gone from a warm red to a dull brown, the kind of color you get when you turn an old TV to the wrong channel. Every now and then, a faint breeze cuts through, but it's not the kind that moves leaves. It just shifts the air enough to make you feel like someone walked past behind you. Before I started the transmitter this morning, I took my shortwave outside to the alley, just to see if anything was coming in clearer with daylight. The bands were thin, most of them silent, but on 6.805 megahertz. I caught a man's voice speaking quickly in a language I didn't know. Short bursts, no pauses, like he was reading from a list. The signal was too clean to be from here. It had that faraway echo you get when something's bounced across an ocean. I lost him after 30 seconds, but just before the static swallowed him, I thought I heard him say 33 in English. I don't know if that was for me, or if it was just a number that lives in a lot of languages. Brookvale is changing in ways that don't show up in headlines, if there were still headlines. The grocery store on Maple, the one with the hand-painted sign that says, "Fresh produce year-round," has had the same 3 apples sitting in the front window for 4 days. They're not rotting, but they're not fresh either. They look paused. The skin is still shiny, but the color's drained from the flesh inside. You can see it where one's been bitten into. The bite mark is brown at the edge, but the rest of the apple's gone this pale, uniform yellow, like the life's been pulled out and replaced with something that just holds the shape. I'd chalk it up to the weird humidity or the lack of refrigeration, but then I saw it in other things too. A loaf of bread on the diner counter, a bunch of bananas in the hardware store break room. They don't decay. They just stop changing. I got a note slid under the door late yesterday, sometime after my last daylight walk. The paper's rough, torn from a lined pad, and the handwriting's shaky. It's from someone who signed it only as W, and they said they've been keeping watch from the roof of the old bank. W says every night, just after 2 a.m., they see a line of walkers cross the intersection at Ridge and 5th, heading east toward the river. Always the same number, 23, not 22, not 24, 23. They don't come from the same street every time, but by the time they hit the intersection, they've formed a line, and they cross with perfect spacing, 5 feet between each person, no more, no less. W says one of them always drops something. Not a big thing, a coin, a button, a scrap of paper. W tried going down after dawn to pick up the coin one night, but when they bent to touch it, they felt their legs lock. Said it was like the ground had turned to ice and their feet had frozen in place. They had to crawl backward on their hands until they were far enough away for their legs to remember they worked. They never touched the coin. I'm sharing this because it's the kind of detail that sounds crazy until you hear it twice. And I have. A man named Avery, who lives above the laundromat, swore he saw the same thing last week. Walkers dropping small objects, like they were leaving breadcrumbs for someone else. I don't know what it means, but I know that when details repeat in a world that's coming apart, you write them down. I keep hearing from people asking if it's worth trying to leave town during daylight. My answer hasn't changed. If you have a safe place with water, food, and thick walls, stay there. The roads out are unpredictable. Some are blocked by cars and debris, others by things that look like cars until you get close and realize the metal's been stripped to a skeleton, and the shells are arranged to funnel you in one direction. I saw it on Route 45 yesterday, frames lined up like teeth, angled, so your only clear path was toward a patch of woods that swallowed the sunlight. I didn't go in. I don't think anyone should. If you do have to move, I've been told by a man named Harris, retired truck driver, been in more towns than most people see in a lifetime, that you should avoid bridges whenever possible, not just at night, but in general. Harris says the walkers are drawn to bridges. He doesn't know why, but he swears that whenever he's seen them in large groups during daylight, they're always somewhere near one. His theory is that the water underneath carries the pulse better, like a wire. I can't confirm that, but it makes sense in the same way thunder makes sense. You feel it in your chest before your ears catch up. I've got a fresh pot of boiled water cooling next to me. It's not much, but it's enough to get through another day. I ration it in coffee mugs because they're easier to carry around the station without spilling. It's strange how quickly you adapt to thinking in terms of what's easy to carry, instead of what looks nice or feels normal. The glassware in the cabinet hasn't been touched in weeks. Too fragile. Too easy to smash if you trip because you were watching the street instead of your own feet. Before I go check the back alley for notes, I want to say something to anyone listening who's been alone for too long. Talk out loud. Doesn't matter what you say. Doesn't matter if it's to yourself, to the room, to an empty chair. The silence works on you. It shapes itself into something heavy and puts its weight on your chest, and if you don't push back, you'll start walking too, even just narrating what you're doing. I'm boiling water. I'm checking the window. I'm winding the clock. Keeps your brain wired to your own voice. I've been doing it since the second night, and I think it's the only reason I haven't gone quiet. This is Logan Cross, 107.6 FM, Brookvale, Pennsylvania. I'll keep the signal up as long as the charge holds. The sun's already higher than it was when I started talking, but that doesn't mean the day's safe. It just means the dark's in hiding. If you're awake, stay that way. And if you're not, make sure someone near you is. It's 10:07 a.m. on 107.6 FM, and I'm running on the second battery while the first one drinks from the bicycle alternator in the hallway. The older kid, Layla, took the front tire off a rusted Schwinn and flipped the frame so the pedals are a hand crank now. Every few minutes, she leans into it, and the voltmeter climbs a millimeter like a patient learning to walk again. I told you I was going to check on a note at the pharmacy from a man named Tyler, who said he had insulin and needed D batteries and bleach. I found the note where he said it would be, taped low on the glass so the morning glare wouldn't white it out. The tape edges were dirty from fingers that aren't steady. The new part was a second note taped beneath it in a different hand. Batteries left in the drop box, bleach coming tomorrow. Insulin moved to east stairwell behind the locked door. Knock 3 times. If no answer, take it. Under that, a drawn arrow pointing to the alley. I don't love alleys anymore. They hold shadows past their due. But it was late enough that the sun got in there and pushed every corner into soft gray. So I went. The drop box was a metal donation bin with the slot bent open. Inside were 4 packs of D cells and a bottle of bleach with a crack in the handle taped shut with blue painter's tape. I knocked on the stairwell door, 3 knocks, then waited and counted to 60 out loud. Nothing. I said his name. Nothing. On the 4th knock, I heard a soft tap back. 1, then 2, then nothing, and when I tried the handle, it opened. On the 3rd step, in the shade where the heat doesn't reach, was a cooler with 2 gel packs that were not cold anymore, a thermometer with the mercury line barely above room temp, and inside the cooler 6 vials labeled in shaky block letters, Tyler, Glargine, for trade. Beside it a second bag, zippered, with syringes and alcohol pads neatly rubber banded. I left 2 packs of D batteries and the bleach and a single-page note that said, "We see you. Trade honored. If you need a runner at dawn, write it here." I closed the door and wedged a chunk of wood in the jamb so it wouldn't swing in the wind and broadcast its secrets to the street. If you are listening, Tyler, I set your name in my ledger next to kept promise. That's the kind of math I care about now. The town feels slower at midday in a way that isn't heat. The clock above the deli counter says 10:07, even though I set it to the time station yesterday at noon. When I wound it this morning, the minute hand moved forward twice, and then stepped back once like it had to negotiate with itself. I don't know if that's in my head or in the gear teeth, but I have seen enough off by 1 to call it a pattern. The apples in the grocery window are still the color of memory instead of fruit. A strip of police tape across maple has stuck to itself exactly where it crossed, so it makes a loop. And a sparrow got curious about the loop and then got confused, and then flew away like it forgot that the air belongs to it. I took the shortwave up the back stairs and tuned while I watched the alley. The time station out of Colorado that usually says the seconds and the calm voice was there, and then it wasn't. There and then it wasn't, like somebody was turning a faucet on and off. On 3rd 215, I caught an amateur net calling itself the Ravennet, voice rough with cigarette mornings, checking in with Altoona, Johnstown, a farm north of Bedford. They did it quick, call signs and single sentences, all business without hero talk. The sentence that stuck came from a woman who said, "My husband sleepwalked at 1:13 in broad daylight, eyes open, hand on the porch rail. Then he stopped and cried without tears and said, I could hear it through the banister. Then her carrier dropped. Ravennet, if you can hear me, I wrote that down and drew a circle around banister. Whatever uses the body like a radio seems to love wood more than steel. It's an old fact in a new dress. Houses carry songs. I walked Ridge as far as the post office and back with my list for the noon bulletin. And there are new marks on the sidewalks I didn't see yesterday. Chalk lines drawn in pale pink, repeating marks that look like sideways ladders, 2 rails and small rungs. They point east. Under one of them, someone wrote, "Not ours." If the walkers are dropping coins and buttons and scraps, maybe someone else is leaving these. And maybe the chalk holds a code the way the old hobo signs used to tell you where supper was kind and where it wasn't. If you're the one drawing, draw 2 circles at the end of a safe block and cross them out if it changes. We need a language that doesn't need batteries. I promised more practical things, so here's what I learned the hard way last night when the dark got inside my head and tried to rearrange furniture. The pulse sits low, but it loves surfaces that pass it along. Floors are traitors. If you must sleep, pull the mattress off the frame and lean it against an interior wall that does not share a line with the street. Sit with your back against it so your skull rests on foam instead of studs. Wedge your feet under something with weight, so if your legs start to drift, they bump into a complaint. Put a pot lid under each bed leg, if you're on a bed, so there's a break between wood and wood. The metal makes a little chime when the leg twitches, and that tiny noise is enough to wake a human when a big one is not. I tried it with the old cot in Studio B, and it worked, 3 times between 2 and 4. I woke to a tin ring and my feet trying to decide without me. A human body does not need permission from the mind to stand. You have to build a room that argues back. Someone asked in a note whether earthing, bare feet on soil, helps or hurts. I don't know. I only know that when I step on dirt, the hum in my teeth drops by half. But the part of my skull that sits behind my ears sings more. Concrete is worse than dirt, tile worse than concrete, wood worse than tile. This is my unscientific stack. If you have old carpet, leave it. If you have a rug, double it up. If you have nothing, cardboard layers are better than nothing, and cardboard stacked 8 sheets thick is better than a prayer alone. You can test your house by laying your head on the floor at night for a second, just a second, and listening for the low roll. If you hear it, move higher in the same room and try again. The house will tell you where it is safe to be both heavy and human. I haven't talked about animals enough because it hurts to talk about them. There are fewer dogs barking at night now, and more dogs sitting like statues on stoops facing east, with their heads tilted the way you tilt your head when you're trying to remember the word for a thing you need. Cats are caught between worlds. They stare at east windows, and then shake, and then bolt under beds. Birds act like a storm is always coming, even when the sky is clear. They flock low, jitter, land, lift, land again. A farmer from outside Millerstown sent a letter in a seed bag with a boy on a scooter. He said his cows are all pressing their noses to the east fence after midnight. Not walking, just leaning so hard the posts bow. He wrote, "They chew, but they don't swallow." He moved them to the west pasture, and they calmed a little, but the calves keep getting their legs caught in the slats because they forget where their feet are when the moon is above the tree line. If you are a farmer and you can hear this, put a radio with loud, messy talk in the barn at night, the kind of human noise that spills, not a steady music with bass. Set it on a chair on rubber feet, so the sound is in the air and not in the wood. Put salt blocks farther west than usual, so your herd has a reason to lean the other way in the hours when animals are honest and mercy is thin. The big systems are failing by layers. Power's been gone long enough that the little surges we saw in the streetlights are done trying. Water pressure is depending on old, tired gravity where towers still have height. Gas lines hold steady in some streets and wheeze in others. I can light a stove in the studio kitchen, but not for long and not too high. And I shut it off at the valve after, because I don't trust lines to remember how to stop. The cell towers blink sometimes in the afternoon, and then go dead. There was a moment today when every phone in a 5-block radius chirped at once, and then went quiet so fast it felt like someone slapped the air. The hospital on Warren is shut tight. They pushed the lobby chairs against the automatic doors so they'd have to fight to open, and then killed the motion sensor with duct tape. On the bulletin board outside, a single paper with a marker message. Dialysis moved to high school gym as long as we have water. Bring your own bleach. That's a sentence that belongs in a museum, but museums are asleep now with their glass eyes open. Insider notes, because rumor is good tinder but bad heat. A retired Army signals guy from across the river. He didn't sign his name, just drew a little lightning bolt, left me a page from a spiral pad with frequencies scribbled across it, and a log of times he heard the push hardest. His list lines up with what Jules saw, heavier between 2:07 and 2:06, then a dip, then heavier again around 2:30. He wrote, "It's a comb. They're combing. If he's right, the pulse isn't a steady flood. It's a rake across us, teeth spaced so whatever it doesn't catch on the first pass, it might on the second." He also wrote that counter-signal attempts are worse than useless. We tried a cancel wave at the quarry with a truck sub, made 3 men walk in daylight, eyes open, hands calm. Do not fight a tide by making another tide. Go to high ground. I believe him because I can hear the grit of limestone dust in his words. Because men who worked quarries don't choose poetry when a straight line will do. A woman who said she was a political aide before the Capitol doors locked. No name, just a card with an embossed crest that made my throat feel small. Left a single line and a phone battery in a padded envelope. There will be no evacuation plan announced. That's all she wrote. I can parse that a few ways, and none of them make you feel held. Either there is no plan, or there is one and it cannot be said out loud, because the saying makes it worse. Both are true in their own ways. The only evacuations I've seen that work are the quiet ones at dawn, 2 blocks at a time, to a thicker walled building with fewer east windows. Someone else left science. A former sleep researcher from Penn State, initials AM, printed 2 pages about slow-wave entrainment and phase locking and wrote in the margin, "We trained students to fall asleep to predictable tones and to stay asleep through noise as long as the pattern held. If the pattern breaks, even a little, the brain stirs to ask, 'Who's there?' Your job is to break the pattern. Don't make a steady sound at night. Make small, harmless interrupts." That's the best explanation I've heard for why the clock with the sticky second hand works, and why the rattle of the old fan stops my knees from moving. At night, be the house that coughs. I took lunch at the desk, not because I wasn't hungry enough to sit somewhere else, but because moving rooms makes the air different, and the air is already too busy. If you've got food that's sealed and has a date on it, eat the thing that's closest to now and push the far ones farther. If you've got a neighbor who still opens their door between noon and 3, trade salt for sugar and a story for both. I ate cold beans and a cracker and 1 square inch of chocolate I found in the office safe leftover from a holiday basket years ago. I did not share the chocolate because I am human, and so are you. I will make it up by giving the next stranger the first good cup of boiled coffee I can make that tastes like something other than metal, At 12:40, the sun slanted through a crack in the kitchen boards and hit the old mixer, and for a moment, the room felt like a normal room in a world where time has a rhythm and people tie their shoes before they leave the house. I used that moment for inventory. We have 9 gallons of clean water in glass, 6 gallons of probably fine in plastic, 4 loaves worth of flour if you count the mouse-eaten bag and sift, 2 jars of yeast that are sleeping but might wake, a handful of tea bags, a hill of instant coffee, canned fruit, more beans than there are stars on our flag, a dozen batteries assorted sizes, 2 marine cells, 1 crank radio, 1 shortwave with a cracked antenna that works better when you touch it because you are part lightning rod, 1 sturdy door, 2 honest locks, 4 people who rotate being brave, a handful of others who knock and leave notes and trade. I wrote those all in the ledger and added a mirror and a ritual, because counting that matters. Count your rituals. Put them on your shelf like cans. I keep circling the river because that's where the walkers aim. I won't go there at night. I went this afternoon instead, to the edge where Maple meets the old boat launch, because I had to see something with my own eyes, or I'd make it worse by guessing. The concrete ramp is a palimpsest of shoe prints. You can see the width and shape if you wet the surface. I poured a cup of water and watched the dark bloom in ovals and lines. Small prints that say child, and big prints that say work boot, and prints that say somebody ran and then didn't. They all end in the same edge where water starts. There are no prints coming back. The river moved slow, slick as oil, with bits of foam that didn't break. I don't know what the river is now. I know water remembers the shape of anything that touches it for a little while, and I know the smell that made me uneasy at dawn is stronger there. The sweet that doesn't belong to this time and this place. I stood exactly as long as it takes to count to 30 under your breath, and then I walked backward until my shadow fell behind me again. The whole way home, I carried a stone in my palm, because something heavy that fits your hand is an anchor, and sometimes it's easier to trick your brain with weight than with words. News from beyond our zip code, a scrap of broadcast out of Scranton, said the guard armory was opened and then closed and then opened again, and that people lined up too neat to be normal people. A ham in Williamsport said the lights in town hum even when they're out if you press your ear to the pole. A teacher in Carlisle wrote that her class journals, the ones she graded the day before the quiet started, all had a line from different kids about a whistle only I can hear, and that half of them put the whistle near the floor and half near the window. She taped those pages in her own journal. Teachers always save the right things without knowing why. If you're listening, keep saving. Paper is the only memory we can hold with our hands without asking permission from a grid that stopped being ours. I'm trying not to make the show a prayer, but everything we're doing sounds like one. I don't mean religious prayers. I mean the kind where you say a thing out loud because your lungs need to push it into the world to prove you exist. My name is Logan Cross. I am in a room. The room has a door. The door has a lock. The lock turns. The sun moves. The river moves faster when I look away. The people who are left make wind with spoons and tin and push a needle into the good part of the meter while the world pretends not to watch. This is not bravado. This is housekeeping for the soul. Afternoon chores, if you're within earshot and safe enough to do them. Refill water. Label it with the date even if the date is a guess. Open one window for 5 minutes to let out what a closed room builds. Close it before the shadows climb furniture. Sweep the floor because dust is a way the house forgets to breathe. Check the rope on the person who needs rope. Move the rope to a new knot so it doesn't memorize a path. Boil something, even if you don't need it boiled, so the smell of made safe fills the room. And scrape your heel on a doormat, because small noises are tacks you put on the bulletin board of the brain to say, awake here. You want hope? I can give you honest hope, and not the kind that makes you take stupid steps. The windmill in the alley now lights 2 strands of bulbs and a tiny, stubborn radio we leave on a talk station during daylight. Edna taught the kids to render bacon fat for grease and trade the cracklings for stories. The grocery owner, who hasn't been home in days, wrote the word take on the window in soap and put a smiley face because she remembered her mother doing the same in the blizzard of '93. The firehouse door is propped with a car jack, and inside they wrote who has inhalers and who has no more inhalers. A boy pushed a tennis ball with a note down the sidewalk, and the world carried it farther than his legs ever could. A truck driver kept a list with the word coffee and the word tell, and those 2 words turn the machinery of a day. People are making maps of their blocks with pencil and taping them to the inside of doors like battle plans for very small battles that matter more than the old big ones we used to pretend were ours. I'll sign off for a while to let the batteries breathe and to walk 1 block north and check on the brothers with the spoon mill, because I want to ask if we can spin it slow after sunset for just a minute to trick my own heart into thinking the world is normal. I won't, because night doesn't forgive steady spins, but wanting to is human, and admitting it helps. I'll be back at 2:30 with the short bulletin, and again at 4:10 if the charge is kind. If you hear me without hiss, if my scratch isn't there at the top of the hour, that isn't me. I am never clean. I am never perfect. I am a man with a dented mic and a mirror spot on the ceiling and a ledger full of names. Say yours out loud now. Say mine if it helps you feel less like furniture. Don't go to the river. Don't follow the chalk ladders unless you drew them. Put pot lids under the bed legs and make your house cough. Drink water. Trade fairly. If you must tie a rope, tie it and don't hate yourself for it. The afternoon is the safest lie day tells, so use it. And when the shadows move, count your rituals and make a new one if you must. This is 107.6 FM, Brookvale, Pennsylvania. This is Logan Cross. Still here. It's 4:18 p.m. on 107.6 FM, and the light outside is starting to lean, that slow tilt it gets when the day's deciding whether to hold or to let go. The shadows are longer than they were an hour ago, and they're stretching toward the east now, not the west. I've been keeping track of that for a week, and it's not just my eyes playing tricks. Every afternoon, somewhere between 4 and 5, the shadows hesitate like they're stuck on a hinge, then they shift just a little off true. Maybe it's the way the sun sits behind the haze that's been hanging over Brookvale since the first week, or maybe it's something else. I've stopped trying to explain it in terms of weather. I came back from the North Block not long ago. The brothers with the spoon mill had their contraption leaning sideways against a stack of milk crates, the axle pulled apart, both of them sitting on the curb with their hands in bacon fat up to the wrists, rubbing it into the spoons. They were laughing about how the grease makes them shine like jewelry in the sunlight. The older one, Evan, said the spin was sticking in the early morning, and Edna told him to treat it like a sewing machine instead of a wheel. I didn't stay long because you don't hover when people are doing something that keeps the lights on, but I left with the image of those spoons catching the late sun and throwing it in a dozen different directions at once. For a second, it looked like they'd trapped a handful of stars. On my way back, I noticed something on the brick wall behind the old VFW. Handprints. Not painted, not chalked, but darker than the rest of the wall. pressed into the bricks like oil had seeped from skin and stayed. Some were small, like a child's, some big. They were all at the same height, shoulder level, and they all faced east. I didn't touch them. I thought about it, but there was a chill in my stomach that told me not to. The prints looked fresh, even though they couldn't be, not with the way the streets have been. A note was waiting for me when I got back, wedged under the door so tight I almost tore it. It's from W again, the one who watches from the bank roof. This time, they said the line of 23 walkers didn't come last night. Instead, there were 8. Same spacing, same direction, but all of them were barefoot. W wrote that he could hear the slap of their soles on the pavement from 3 stories up, and the sound was perfectly in sync, like a single foot walking 8 bodies. He swears the moment they passed the corner, a gust of wind followed, just strong enough to make the flag on the courthouse twitch. I've seen enough strange to know this isn't a story you make up for fun. I've been turning over the question of why some people don't seem to hear the pull. In the notes I've gotten, in the voices I've caught on shortwave, there are a few who claim they've stood right next to a walker in the middle of the night and felt nothing. One woman from Belafonte said she held her husband by the arm as he stared east and tried to step away, but nothing in her own legs moved. She said the only difference between them is that she's been deaf since she was 9. Maybe that means something, maybe it doesn't, but I'm writing it down in case it does. Practical note for anyone moving supplies: don't carry them in metal cans or buckets after dark. If the pulse really is riding through surfaces, metal will sing it straight into your hands. Use cloth, use wood, even cardboard if it's dry. I learned that the hard way last night when I tried to bring in a can of water from the drop point, and my fingertips went numb for an hour. It came back, but the nails are still tender. The town's rhythm is slower today. I've only seen 3 people out since morning, and all of them were the kind of moving that says they're still awake, checking windows, walking in loops, keeping their heads turning. The silence is heavier, though. Even the birds aren't making the usual evening racket. Normally, by now, you'd hear sparrows in the trees on 5th arguing over roosts, but the branches are still. No sound but the creak of old wood when the wind cuts through. I've got a pot of water coming to a boil on the camping stove in the corner. The smell of the gas is sharp in here, but I keep the window cracked for a minute to let it out. I'll use half for tea, the rest for topping off the glass jugs. I'm trying to get in the habit of boiling at least a gallon every afternoon, so I don't end up doing it in the dark. The last thing you want at night is the sound of water rolling in a pot. It's too much like the river, and you don't want to give your brain that kind of idea. I don't know how far this thing has spread, but the radio bands tell me it's not just here. Today I caught a clipped transmission from someone in Ontario, warning about river roads and unmarked crossings. They said the pull is stronger near moving water, and that they've seen whole groups stop in the middle of bridges, just standing, waiting for something. They didn't say what, and I don't think they knew. For now, I'm going to keep the signal running while the battery allows. I'll be here until the light starts to turn that ugly blue-gray. That means the dark's close behind. Then I'll shut it down, check the knots on the ropes, and make the place cough a little before I try to rest. This is Logan Cross, 107.6 FM, Brookvale, Pennsylvania. Keep your head up. Keep your feet still when the pull comes. And if you can't, make sure someone's there to pull you back. It's 7:02 p.m. on 107.6 FM, and the sun's just a sliver now, tucked low behind the haze that's been squatting over Brookvale all week. The light that's left has that bruised color, like the skin around an old injury, gold at the edges, gray at the center, and it's seeping through in thin lines wherever the boards don't quite meet. I've already set the mirror on the shelf for morning. Won't need it again until the first light tomorrow, if there is a tomorrow the way we think of it. The streets have shifted. I can't explain it in measurements, but I feel it. Even from inside, I know there are more of them out there tonight. The air presses harder, and the boards on the front windows keep giving this soft tick, as if the wood's responding to footsteps on the pavement outside. Not right up close, more like 50, maybe 60 yards off. That's new. Usually, you only feel that if they're right outside the door. Before the last light went, I climbed halfway up the fire escape to check the view toward Maple. That's when I saw them. 14 walkers, all heading east like usual, but this time there was something orderly. They weren't spaced in a perfect line, not like W's 23, but they kept a rhythm. 1 step, 2, pause. 1 step, 2, pause. And they all stopped at the exact same moment in front of the pharmacy, not looking at each other, not looking at the building. Just still. Then, as if on some unseen signal, they moved again. No turn, no rush, just east. I didn't stay out long. The air felt different, thicker, like it had weight you could almost lean on, and I could feel the skin on my arms prickling even through the sleeves. I made it back inside and bolted the door twice, then moved the metal filing cabinet in front of it. Not because I think it'll stop them. If they wanted in, I don't know that anything would, but because it's something my hands can do. A note was waiting under the back door when I got back. Folded twice, written in pencil, the words faint like whoever wrote it, pressed just hard enough to be legible. It was from someone named Clara. She says she's been sleeping in the old elementary school on Grant Street, in the library. Says the books help muffle the sound from outside, but last night she heard something else. A low hum that wasn't the pulse and wasn't coming from inside her head. She followed it to the science room upstairs and found a radio, one of those heavy gray boxes they used for morning announcements, switched on and buzzing with static. No one had been in there to turn it on. The power's been out for days. She unplugged it and the hum stopped, but she swears the floor still vibrated after. She wanted me to warn people. Don't trust that something's safe just because it's familiar. I've been thinking about that all evening. The pull seems to find ways in through things we recognize. Bridges we've crossed 100 times, streets we've walked half asleep on the way to work, voices we know coming from radios that shouldn't be working. It's like it borrows the shape of something normal to get you to step closer. Once you're close enough, it doesn't need to ask again. Here's something practical. If you're bedding down tonight, put weight on your door. Not just a lock, weight. A chair tipped under the knob, a trunk, a stack of books. Anything that makes noise if it shifts. Even if it won't hold against a real push, the sound will pull you out of whatever half-sleep the pull tries to leave you in. And if you've got someone else with you, trade shifts. 2 hours awake, 2 hours down. Don't get greedy for rest. That's when it gets you. Out past the river, I caught a faint signal earlier. Scratchy, far, probably bouncing from who knows where. A man's voice, slow, almost calm. They're building something. That's all I got before it cut. No place name, no details. But it stuck with me, because if that's true, if they're not just walking, if they're gathering somewhere, then all this movement is leading to a point. And I don't think we'll like what's waiting there. I'll keep the transmitter up until the battery dips into the red. After that, it's ropes. the pot lids under the bed legs, and the fan rattling just enough to break the rhythm. If you're listening right now, make your house cough. Make it hiccup, wheeze, trip over its own heartbeat. Do whatever it takes to keep the pull from finding a steady way in. This is Logan Cross, 107.6 FM, Brookvale, Pennsylvania. Night's here. Don't follow it. Don't even look it in the eye. I'll be here as long as the charge lasts. It's 11:46 p.m. on 107.6 FM, and the battery's needle is creeping down, but not in the red yet. The room smells faintly of metal from the stove and the coil of the little space heater I ran earlier to take the damp out of the air. The night outside feels wrong, even without seeing it. There's a stillness that isn't rest, like the whole town is holding its breath underwater. The boards on the front windows have cooled enough that when I press my hand to them, I can feel the cold of the air on the other side coming through in slow waves. I've been hearing it all evening, faint at first, then sharper, the cadence of steps out on Fifth. Not a crowd, not a rush, just the steady, unbroken slap of soles against pavement. I counted once. 47 steps, pause. 47 again, pause, over and over until the sound faded. The pauses are the worst. They leave space for your imagination to wander, for your body to lean toward the door without meaning to. I kept my seat at the desk, both hands flat on the wood until the urge passed. A scrap of paper came in just before dark, slipped between the door and the jamb. From W again. This time, they weren't writing about lines of walkers. They wrote about the bank building itself. Said that around 2 in the morning, when the air is at its heaviest, the walls begin to vibrate. Not shake, just vibrate, like there's a huge machine running deep underground. W says it makes the coins in their pocket turn slightly, all facing the same way. That detail, it sticks with me. Facing the same way. Like the people outside. Clara, the one sleeping in the elementary school, left me another message too. She's been moving between the library and the science room since she found that radio. Tonight she said she stayed downstairs and heard someone walking in the hall above her. Slow, deliberate, not pacing, just a straight line from one end of the hall to the other. When she went up in daylight, she found chalk marks on the floor in front of each classroom door. Not words, just an X, always tilted the same way. She wiped one away with her shoe, and the chalk dust felt warm. For anyone listening who still has to move at night, don't. But if you absolutely have to, never go in a straight line for too long. Break your path, step sideways, circle back. The pull works best when it's got a clear direction to work with. I've started walking in squares inside the building when I need to stretch, just to train my body out of heading for the door. I tried the shortwave earlier and picked up the faint tail of a conversation from somewhere north, maybe New York State. 2 voices, both hurried. One said, "We've seen them carrying," and the other said, "What?" before the static swallowed them. Carrying what? I don't know. But the idea of them holding anything other than themselves makes my stomach twist. It's quiet again now, except for the rattle of the old fan and the occasional creak from the roof. I've put the pot lids under the bed legs and looped the rope around my ankle, tied to the desk. Not because I think I'll walk, but because I know that thinking you won't is the quickest way to start. This is Logan Cross, 107.6 FM, Brookvale, Pennsylvania. The night's long. Stay heavy in your body, light in your steps. And remember, if the pull feels stronger, it's not because you're weaker. It's because it knows you're still here. It's 12:31 a.m., and I can hear the clock in the next room ticking like it's pressing on my eardrums. The pull always feels worse after midnight, like it's been waiting for the last of the town's lights to die before leaning on the door. I keep glancing at the crack between the boards, where the thinnest sliver of outside leaks in. It's black, but not the kind of black that feels empty. It's thick, like it's holding something back. I just came off a faint signal from the west. Could have been Pittsburgh, could have been somewhere smaller. The man's voice was hoarse, breaking mid-sentence. He said, "They don't just walk anymore. They're asking." He didn't get to explain. The line went dead in a burst of static like a wire snapping. Asking. I can't stop replaying it in my head, wondering how you'd even know if they were. Would it sound like a voice? Or would it just be that quiet, awful knowing in your chest that someone wants something from you? Out on the street, there's a new sound, not the measured steps from earlier. This is softer, dragging, like someone sliding their feet over wet leaves. Every so often, I hear a dull thump, as if whatever's moving is bumping into the side of the buildings, feeling its way along. I haven't heard it pass my corner yet, which means it's still coming down Main. I found something strange an hour ago when I went to refill the kettle. One of the jars on the shelf, the sugar jar, was sitting an inch closer to the edge than I left it. I know I didn't touch it. I keep things in neat rows so I'll notice if they've shifted. I can't decide if it's worse to think something got in, or to think that the pull can move things now without crossing the walls. To anyone tuned in, if you're barricaded, keep checking your placement of objects. Not just doors and windows. Objects, jars, chairs, books, anything with weight or shape. If they start changing position, it means whatever's working on us is learning how to work without walking. The heater's off now, and the air has a kind of pressure to it. My ears feel full, like when you're too deep underwater. That usually means we're in for a bad stretch. I've got 2 candles ready, and the rope looped higher up on my leg tonight, tighter. My hands keep flexing without me meaning to, like my body's getting ready to stand before my head does. This is Logan Cross, 107.6 FM, still awake in Brookvale, Pennsylvania. If you're awake too, don't move. And if something's asking, don't answer. It's 1:04 a.m., and the sound is here. Not outside anymore. Not approaching. It's here. The dragging steps have rounded the corner, slow, deliberate, as if whoever or whatever is out there knows I'm counting each one. There's a pause between every movement, like it's listening back, waiting for my breath. And I'm making the mistake of giving it what it wants. My lungs feel too loud. Through the crack in the boards, I can't see much, just the ripple of shadow against shadow. But every few seconds, there's this faint shiver in the darkness, like heat over asphalt. I thought it might be my eyes playing tricks, but then the ripple shifted against the wind, not with it. The thumping makes sense now. It's carrying something. I can hear the weight hit the ground and then drag again. Heavy, uneven. And there's this awful wet slap when it moves, like it's not wrapped in cloth anymore. On the shortwave, someone tried to come through, faint and far off, but the signal was barely holding. I could only catch pieces. Tethered. Don't break the... They follow the rope. It was swallowed in static before I could reply. I don't even know if they were warning me or telling me to do it. The sugar jar I mentioned earlier, it's moved again, another inch closer to the counter's edge. And this time, it's not alone. The mug beside it has turned, handle now pointing toward the wall. I haven't moved from this chair. I haven't touched a thing. I've started marking the positions in pencil. It's the only way to be sure later that I'm not imagining it. I suggest anyone still listening does the same. If the objects in your space are being moved, it means the barrier's thinner than you think. The dragging has stopped. No sound, no breath, just the faint hum in my ears and that ripple in the dark, waiting. This is Logan Cross, 107.6 FM, still here, still sitting in the cold. If you're out there, keep still. If it's here, don't greet it. It's 1:16 a.m., and it just touched the door. I didn't hear a knock, not a scrape, just a pressure, like the air in the room shifted. The boards across the entrance gave a soft groan, the kind wood makes when someone leans against it, patient, testing. Then came the sound of the latch breathing. That's the only way I can describe it. Metal doesn't make that noise unless it's being turned very slowly, in tiny pulses, like fingers tightening and loosening in rhythm. The ripple in the dark has moved closer to the glass pane. It doesn't lean forward, doesn't press, just hovers. And behind it, shapes I can't quite resolve. Long, low arcs that seem to bend without joints. Every now and then, one of them flickers out of existence entirely, then returns an inch to the left, as if space itself hiccuped. The mug on the counter fell. I didn't jump. Too numb for that, but it didn't shatter either. When I picked it up, it was warm. Not, someone just drank from it, warm. More like, been sitting in the sun all day, warm. There's a smell now, seeping through the cracks, damp rope, copper, and the faint sweetness of overripe fruit. I know that smell. I've smelled it on old docks when the tide's low enough to show what it shouldn't. And then, the whisper, not through the walls, not from outside, right beside my left ear. I can't tell you what it said, not because I don't remember, but because the moment I try to recall the word, my teeth ache. If you're still listening, check your doors. Not for locks won't matter, but for the spaces between the wood. If the air on the other side feels warmer than inside, it's already closer than you think. This is Logan Cross, 107.6 FM, breathing in shallow gasps, hoping the next one won't be cut short. It's 1:24 a.m., and the boards just shifted, not a creak this time. A sharp pop, like a knuckle cracking under strain. The sound went through me in a way no noise should, like it wasn't just in my ears, but in the bones of my jaw, the bridge of my nose, the back of my skull. I'm not looking at the door anymore. I can't. The gap between the boards is wider now, and there's movement in it. Not a hand, not an eye, just something pale, like smoke with weight, curling in and out as if it's tasting the air. Every instinct says I should back away, but the air behind me is colder than the air in front, and I don't like what that means. My breath's fogging in this room, but that smoke in the gap isn't frosting at all. It's warm. Then the second pop came, lower down near the floor. A strip of wood flexed outward for half a second, then snapped back into place like a breath being held. I could hear the nails squeal. It's testing the grain. The radio board's meters are flickering now, not from power loss, but like they're being manually dimmed and brightened by something outside the signal path. I've lost the hum in my headphones. There's only a faint hiss, and beneath it, a slow, deliberate inhale. If you're out there, and your home is quiet, I need you to listen. Not for knocks or glass breaking, but for the sound of something learning the shape of your door. That's the part before it decides if it wants in. This is Logan Cross, 107.6 FM, and I think I'm about 2 breaths away from finding out what's on the other side. It's 1:26 a.m. The board just gave one last snap, loud enough that the sound seemed to ripple down the hall. The nails didn't hold this time. A sliver of wood fell inward and hit the floor with the lightest tap, like the click of a pen. Through the new gap, something slid. Not a full arm, not a leg. Just enough to see it wasn't smoke at all. It was skin, but wrong. It moved like it didn't have bones, folding in on itself to pass through a space far too narrow for anything living. The air changed the second it entered. Heavy, warm, like someone had just exhaled right into my lungs. The frost on my breath vanished in one blink. The smell hit next, not rot, not sulfur. It was wet stone, like the inside of a cave, with an undercurrent of iron. I've smelled that before, but only after a bad accident on the highway, when someone was bleeding into their own lungs. The meters on the radio went dead flat. No hiss, no hum, just absence. It didn't rush in. It didn't lunge. It poured into the room, across the floor, up the wall, onto the ceiling, until the only thing in front of me was the faint outline of where it was bending the air. Then it spoke. Not aloud. Not in my ears. I've been following the signal. This is Logan Cross. 107.6 FM. Still on air. For now. It waited, not like an animal deciding when to strike, more like someone standing at a locked door, certain it would open eventually. The shape began to pull itself together. Shadows bled inward, pooling toward a center that slowly took form. Shoulders, head, the faint slope of a jaw. But it wasn't solid. Every edge shimmered, like it was being seen through heat rising off asphalt. When the head tilted, I caught the eyes. They weren't glowing, not in the way stories always describe. No bright color, no animal shine. They were reflective, like water at night, catching light that wasn't there. And the longer I stared, the more I saw inside them. Small, sharp flashes of places I didn't know, like the view through someone else's memories. Its mouth didn't open, but the words came again, low and certain. The signal you send, it crosses farther than you think. Something deep in the building popped. Could have been a breaker, could have been a pipe. But the lights above me guttered once, twice, and went black. Only the faint trace of those eyes remained. And then, one step forward. I kept my hands on the desk, fingers spread wide, not because I thought it would keep me steady, but because I needed to feel something solid, something that reminded me the floor was still under me, and the desk was still real. The air around the thing had weight now, like it had dragged a storm inside with it, pressing down on my chest and shoulders until each breath had to be bargained for. It moved in a way that didn't fit with the shape it wore. The head stayed still, fixed on me, but the rest of it shifted like a fluid given a momentary excuse to mimic a body. Limbs didn't swing, they slid, every joint an afterthought. And as it came closer, the reflection in its eyes grew sharper, like the memory it was showing me wanted to push its way into my head whether I liked it or not. The images stuttered. A strip of road lit only by one dying street lamp, an ocean horizon with something impossibly tall just at the edge, the inside of a room with no corners, only smooth, rounded walls that seemed to bend inward forever. None of these places were mine. None of them could have been here, but I knew they were real, and that was worse. The radio equipment made a soft sound then, a relay clicking in the dead quiet. I glanced over and saw the transmission meter twitching, the needle trying to move but hitting some kind of resistance, like it was fighting to send a signal through syrup. The cables under the desk were trembling, not from any power surge, but as if something was running its hands along them from the other end, feeling its way toward me. I swallowed, and in that pause, it leaned closer. So close the temperature jumped from cold to warm in a single breath. My reflection bent and warped in the black surface of its eyes, and I realized that if I kept looking, it would not be my own face staring back much longer. When it spoke again, the sound was inside my teeth, vibrating up through the roots. Your voice carries. It threads the dark. You will keep speaking for me. The choice in those words wasn't mine to make. And just then, somewhere outside, the first scream cut through the night. The scream didn't come from outside. I knew it before my brain even gave it permission to believe. It was too close, too raw. There was no glass, no concrete between it and me. It had texture, like it had torn itself straight out of a throat in the next room, the sound fraying at the edges before slamming into silence. I froze. Every instinct said, "Don't move." The thing in front of me didn't so much as tilt its head. It just stopped, like a predator that already knew where its prey was going to run. Then it turned, not with its body, but with the sound of something turning, as if the air had bent before the shape did. My eyes flicked to the studio door. The latch was still down. No one should have been able to get in, but the scream had been inside. Then came the second sound, lighter, stranger. Not footsteps, not human ones. More like something dragging itself forward with deliberate pauses in between, each pause a little longer, as if it was listening. I slid my hand toward the switchboard. The static feed was still hissing faintly in the headphones, and for one stupid second, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could push the live mic on, get someone listening to hear this before it reached me. But the thing at the desk moved first. One moment it was still. The next, it was between me and the door without crossing the space in between. Just there, and I swear the station walls stretched a little to make room for it. Then the dragging came again, louder now, close enough that I could hear what was causing it. Nails or claws, slow and deliberate, catching on the floor with a soft tick before sliding forward again. Whatever was in the hall was coming for the door, and the thing inside with me didn't look like it planned to stop it. The latch on the studio door trembled once, just a small, sharp click, like someone testing it. Then silence. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. Another click. This time slower, deliberate, like fingers or something pretending to be fingers was working the mechanism, learning it. The thing in front of me, still blocking the door, leaned just slightly to the side, as though it wanted me to see. Its head tilted in a way a neck shouldn't bend, like it was giving me permission to watch what was about to come through. The lock gave a soft, metallic sigh. The door swung inward. What I saw beyond it wasn't the station hallway. It was too long, too narrow, and it didn't end, at least, not in any way my mind wanted to accept. The walls were slick, breathing faintly in and out, their surface bending toward the center like they were listening. The carpet was gone. In its place was a dark, wet floor that reflected just enough of the studio's light to make it look like a mirror someone had drowned in. And halfway down that impossible corridor, something was waiting. It wasn't moving. It wasn't even facing me. But I knew, in that deep animal way you know when a predator has fixed on you, that it was aware. The dragging sound came again, but now it was behind me too, inside the studio. I turned just enough to catch a shadow on the wall. It wasn't mine. I didn't slam the door, not because I was brave, because I wasn't sure it would close. The hinge hung at an angle now, like it had been softened. The metal had this strange dark sheen to it, the same way iron looks after it's been sitting in blood for too long. The thing in the hallway didn't move, not even when I shifted my weight and made the floor creak. But the walls around it did. They swelled outward, contracting again like lungs pulling in breath. Every time they exhaled, a low groan rolled through the corridor. Not human, not animal, something bigger. Behind me, the dragging sound got closer. I could hear it catching on the ridges in the floor, that rubbery snag pop as it tore over the uneven spots. I looked back over my shoulder, just a quick glance. Big mistake. It was closer now, almost within arm's reach. Its outline was wrong. Too thin in the middle, too wide at the joints. Like a shadow stretched in directions light doesn't work in. It leaned forward in jerks, its movements catching up to its own shape a fraction of a second too late, like bad video buffering. The thing in the hallway shifted for the first time. Not toward me, just slightly to the left. Enough for me to see that there was more behind it. Shapes in the distance, unmoving, stacked. No, piled. I thought they were debris, until one of them breathed. And that's when the smell hit. Like wet earth, rotting leaves, and something sweet that should never be sweet. I kept my back to the wall, pressing the mic close, even though I knew deep in my ribs, that speaking was a mistake. The last thing you want out here is to let it know exactly where you are. But silence wasn't safety anymore. Silence was an invitation. I tried to control my breathing, keep it low, keep it steady, but it sounded thunderous in my own ears. My pulse was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I reached for the transmit switch anyway, thumb hesitating over the worn plastic. Then I heard it. My own voice. Not from the headphones, not from the mic. From the hallway. A perfect, cracked imitation, like someone had recorded me hours ago and played it back through a speaker wrapped in wet cloth. "Station's still here," it rasped, word for word. The exact phrase I'd spoken 20 minutes earlier, when I'd thought we were safe for the night. I froze. It didn't just repeat. It rearranged. The imitation voice began stitching together other scraps of my own broadcast. Bits of warnings, words of comfort, all twisted into nonsense. Keep open all doors. Breathe with us. The dragging behind me stopped, and that silence was worse. The shapes in the hallway began to shift again, one tilting forward far enough for the light to catch its face, or where its face should have been. The skin there looked stretched too thin over nothing, eyes sunken deep, jaw slightly parted as if trying to remember what mouths were for. The wall beside me pulsed, once, hard enough to push my shoulder forward. That's when I realized it wasn't the wall at all. It was them. They weren't just in the hallway anymore. They were around me. And the voice, that warped, perfect mimic, whispered something new. Not a recording this time. Not rearranged. Fresh, alive. It said my name. I didn't answer it. I didn't dare. If I'd said anything, I knew it would come right back at me, in that voice, cutting up my words into something that sounded like a prayer for the wrong god. The air in the room had changed. Not colder, denser, like the oxygen had been replaced with something heavier, something you could almost chew. Every breath scraped down my throat, leaving that strange copper taste that meant I was already breathing it in, whatever it was. The radio hissed in the corner, spitting static in slow, uneven pulses. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Because I realized it wasn't picking up interference from the outside. It was breathing. Through the static, I heard faint thuds in pairs. A slow heartbeat. Not mine. Not human. My eyes tracked the room, looking for the source, but it was everywhere. Walls, floor, even the desk under my arm. The sound wasn't traveling through the room. It was inside it. I took a step toward the door. My foot sank. Not much, just enough for the tile to press up around my boot like damp clay. I pulled it free, my stomach twisting, and saw the faintest ridge close over where I'd stepped, sealing it back into a perfect, unbroken surface. I was standing in the middle of something's skin. The mimic voice came again, only this time it was closer, right in my ear, as if it had leaned down to whisper from behind my shoulder. You can't leave. Every hair on my body stood on end. My hand found the cold steel of the door handle. I knew what was on the other side. Cold night, cracked asphalt, and the open dark. I also knew that whatever had been hunting outside for days hadn't stopped. The heartbeat thudded again, faster now. The static in the radio rose to a sharp hiss, almost a scream, then cut out completely. Silence fell. And in that silence, something tapped, light, deliberate, on the inside of the door I was about to open. I don't remember deciding. My body just moved. The lock turned under my palm with a metallic click that echoed too loud. I pulled the door open. The cold air hit me like a slap, clean and sharp. For half a second, I thought I was free, until I saw the fog. Not drifting, not natural, but curling in deliberate shapes, the way fingers curl when they want to take hold. It wasn't outside anymore. It was waiting. I stepped into the fog, and the world ended. Not in the sense of collapse or explosion, just erasure. The building behind me vanished in less than a second, its sharp angles dissolving into a wall of shifting white-gray that moved like it was alive. Even my own body was fading, first my boots, then my hands, until I looked down and saw only the suggestion of limbs, shadows suspended in milk. Sound didn't travel here. My footsteps were muffled to the point of silence, as though the fog was swallowing the noise before it could go anywhere. I tried to breathe slowly, to pace myself, but every inhale felt like pulling air through wet cloth. It carried a faint sweetness at first, like old fruit left too long in the heat, then an aftertaste of iron, as if something deep in the mist was bleeding, and I'd just walked into the wound. Somewhere ahead, I caught movement. Not sight, exactly. More the pressure of movement, the way you can sense someone in the same room even with your eyes closed. It drifted just far enough away that I couldn't make out form, but close enough that my gut told me it was watching. The whispers started soft. So soft I thought they were my own thoughts leaking back at me in the wrong order. Keep walking. Left foot. Right foot. The voice wasn't mine, but it wore the tone of someone who knew every word I'd ever spoken. I stopped. The fog didn't. It kept shifting forward against my shins, pressing just enough to remind me that I was moving slower than it wanted. The whisper repeated, a little louder this time. Left foot, right foot. You're almost there. There was no there in sight. The pressure in my ears grew. Not pain, but a fullness, like I'd dived deep underwater. Instinctively, I reached up to pop them, but my fingers met nothing. Not my ear, not my hair, nothing. My hand just didn't come back. The fog had taken it, and though I could still feel it was attached, the sensation was muted, like it now belonged to someone else. Shapes began to form ahead, tall, thin, swaying. For one heartbeat, they could have been trees. The next, they were columns of pale, jointed limbs bending in the mist. They moved with the kind of patience that comes from knowing prey has nowhere to run. The whisper shifted, no longer guiding. Now it was coaxing. You've been breathing us in for a while. Don't fight it. And for a terrible second, I felt it. The temptation to just exhale and never take another breath on my own again. That's when the first hand reached out of the fog toward my face. It touched my cheek, and for a moment, I didn't flinch. Not because I wasn't afraid, God I was, but because the touch was warm, human warm, familiar in a way I couldn't place, like the hand of someone I'd known in another life. The fingers were long, delicate, trembling slightly, and the warmth seeped into my skin in a slow pulse that matched my heartbeat. Then I realized it was matching my heartbeat because it was my heartbeat. The rhythm was no longer mine alone. It had been caught, mirrored, and folded into something else. The fog wasn't just touching me, it was sinking with me. I stepped back. The hand followed. It didn't hold my face, but hovered an inch away, as if waiting for permission. And behind it, through the gauze of white, I could see faint silhouettes, too many to count, standing perfectly still, each with their own reaching hands. The further my eyes adjusted, the more I realized their arms weren't separate from the fog at all. They were made of it, strands of vapor shaped into human forms. Faces without features, torsos without edges. Not here, not entirely, just pressing through, the way something underwater breaks the surface for a moment, before sinking back down. Do you remember? A voice asked. It wasn't coming from in front of me. It was inside me, vibrating against my ribs. The voice had no gender, no age, no accent. It was built from scraps of every voice I'd ever heard, layered until it became something I couldn't unrecognize. Do you remember the door? It said again. I didn't. But my head nodded without asking me first. The fog reacted, shivering like a living curtain in the wind. The hand drifted down from my cheek, tracing the outline of my jaw, and then extended its finger to my chest. I expected a push, but instead, it passed through me. Not painfully, not coldly, just a pressure that slid inside like a key into a lock. My lungs seized for half a second, then let go, and when I exhaled, the breath came out wrong. It wasn't steam or mist. It was words. Not my words, not in any language I knew. They fell into the air like thin black ribbons, curling and fading before they hit the ground. The fog took them greedily, pulling them upward into its shifting body. Somewhere in that exchange, I understood. I wasn't speaking. I was giving something up. And the more I breathed, the more it wanted. The shapes around me began to close in, not stepping, not walking, but drifting forward in perfect silence, their arms stretching unnaturally long. Each one reached for a different part of me, shoulders, wrists, back of the neck, until I was standing in the middle of a crowd I couldn't touch, but could feel inside my bones. through the door. The voice said again, softer now. You've been here before. You belong here. That was the worst part. Not the cold certainty that they were lying, but the quiet suspicion that they might be telling the truth. And when the fog finally parted enough for me to see what they meant by door, my legs moved on their own. The door wasn't a door, not in any way the word had ever meant in my life before this moment. It wasn't wood or metal or stone. It wasn't even a shape you could pin down. It was an opening the way a wound is an opening, raw, alive, and wrong. At first, it was just a darker cut in the pale fog, a thin vertical slit that shimmered as if it was wet. But the more I stared, the more it seemed to pulse, breathing in slow, greedy swells. The edges flexed outward, and what I thought was darkness inside shifted. No, not darkness. Depth. The kind of depth that made your eyes ache because it kept going far beyond where your mind was comfortable following. The voice inside me didn't have to tell my feet to move. They were already answering, already stepping forward in that reluctant shuffle you see in people walking toward an execution. My skin felt looser the closer I got, like it was preparing to peel away. Behind me, the fog people had formed a half circle, hurting me without touching. Their faceless heads tilted in perfect unison, following every twitch of my shoulders. They didn't move like separate beings, more like a single thought split into 100 bodies. I tried to stop. I really did. My knees locked for half a heartbeat, my heels dug into the ground, but something in my chest pulled. It wasn't a tug from the outside. It was an emptiness inside me, a cavity I hadn't noticed until now, and whatever was on the other side of that slit promised to fill it. The air near the door was different. Heavy, yes, but also damp in a way that made me think of the space under a dock at low tide. Salt, rot, and the faint copper bite of something bleeding. I felt it on my tongue before I even inhaled. Then the slit widened. It didn't creak or groan, it sighed. A deep, relieved exhale that pushed the fog back in slow curls. And in that opening, I saw motion. Not the kind that comes from wind or water, but something purposeful. Hands, too many to count. They weren't reaching out. They were folded, twitching, some clasped together like in prayer, others splayed on an unseen surface. The skin was pale, veined, almost translucent, as if they'd been underwater too long. They moved with tiny spasms, as though testing invisible restraints. One of them noticed me. I don't know how I knew it noticed me, but it did. Its fingers uncurled, straightened, and pressed toward the edge of the slit until the tips slid through. They didn't break the surface so much as melt through it, like warm wax through cheesecloth. The moment those fingertips breached the fog, the cold hit me. Not from the air, but from somewhere inside. My thoughts slowed. My name, my own name, slipped back into some unlit corner of my head, out of reach. "You see now?" the voice said. And I did. I saw that the hands weren't separate. They were part of something vast, something waiting. The slit wasn't an entrance. It was a mouth, and it was deciding whether or not to swallow me whole. My next step was already halfway done before I even realized I was moving again. The threshold didn't feel like a line I stepped over. It felt like my body came apart and reassembled on the other side. The first thing to go was sound. The fog-muted world behind me vanished into a silence so complete it made my pulse feel like a shout. My ears rang for a moment, then even that was gone. The second was wait. My feet were still moving, but there was no ground. only the sensation of falling in every direction at once. My stomach should have lurched, but it didn't. Instead, it was as if my insides had been replaced with light that was too dim to see, but too heavy to ignore. The space here wasn't black. It was colorless, like an old photograph bleached until only the faintest outlines remained. The air, if it was air, was warm in patches, icy in others, and it carried with it the smell of wet stone and something older than stone. Something animal. I looked down at my hands. They were wrong. Not different in shape or size. Wrong in texture. My skin looked like a thin film over something shifting underneath, muscles moving too independently, as if they hadn't agreed yet on what kind of body they were inhabiting. When I flexed my fingers, I felt extra joints bending where there shouldn't be any. That's when the walls appeared. Not built walls, no mortar, no seams, just sudden towering planes on either side of me, curving inward like I was inside the gullet of some immense creature. They were wet, glossy, and the way the faint light slid over them made my stomach tighten. The surface wasn't smooth. It was rippling, as though something behind it was moving. Then came the breathing. Slow, rhythmic, and deep enough that it pushed the walls out and in with each cycle. Every inhale drew me forward a few inches, no matter how hard I tried to stand still. Every exhale pressed me back, the air tinged with the copper taste of blood. And then I realized it wasn't the walls breathing. It was me. Somewhere far away. No, somewhere inside. The voice whispered again, clearer now. This is where you end, and we begin. I'll take my time with this one. Draw it out so it feels like the descent is stretching forever, where every sensation is amplified, and the reality of this place is something you taste before you understand. I didn't remember taking another step, but the ground, if it was ground, shifted beneath me, flexing like a muscle. Not a simple twitch either. This was the slow, deliberate curl of something waking up under my weight. It was warm now, not like sunlight warm, but like the fevered heat of skin that's been pressed under blankets too long. The heat rose in waves, carrying a faint, metallic tang that clung to the back of my throat. It wasn't blood, not exactly. More like the ghost of blood. Something too old to be fresh, but too fresh to be forgotten. I glanced over my shoulder. What had been the doorway, the last fragile link to the place I'd come from, was gone. Not sealed, not closed, simply erased. Behind me was only the same soft nothing that pressed in from every side. The knowledge that I couldn't retrace my steps didn't hit like a shock. It settled in quietly, the way a long-buried truth rises up without ceremony. I tried to focus on distance, but there was no perspective here. The walls, if they were walls, kept changing. Sometimes they were impossibly far apart, and I felt like I was walking down the center of a dried-up canyon. Other times, they tightened until I had to angle my shoulders, the slick surfaces grazing my arms with a damp that felt almost intentional, like a touch, like the brief drag of fingers that know you're trying not to flinch. The air was getting heavier, not thick like fog, thick like weight. Every inhale was a slow drag of invisible stone through my lungs. The rhythm of the breathing was still there, matching my own without my permission. It was hard to tell whether I was syncing with it or it was syncing with me. That's when I started noticing the shapes. They weren't ahead or behind. They were within the walls. Bulges, depressions, and slow-moving shadows that seemed to be just under the surface. I told myself they weren't faces. Faces have edges, features. and these were more like suggestions of something waiting to become a face, but not yet sure whose. The further I went, the more the ground betrayed me. It was no longer solid, even in pretense. Sometimes it gave way underfoot like wet sand, and sometimes it pushed up like I was stepping on the chest of something trying to rise. Each time, I felt that same low hum, not in my ears, but deep inside the bones of my legs, like the entire place was vibrating in a frequency my mind couldn't parse, but my body couldn't ignore. I thought I saw light ahead. Not white light, but a thin, translucent gold, almost like sunlight bleeding through the lid of a closed eye. The color pulsed faintly, in time with the breathing. Every instinct in me screamed not to go toward it, but there was no way. Here, direction was an illusion, and choice was the most convincing lie of all. The closer I got, the more the air began to move, not in drafts or gusts, but in a deep, constant current, as if the entire space was inhaling. With every breath it took, the walls seemed to lean closer, curving overhead until the ceiling was no more than a series of undulating ridges above me. Droplets formed there, fat and viscous, falling slowly enough that I could see faint spirals twisting inside them before they burst on the ground and hissed away into steam. That's when the sound returned. At first, it was a low, wet rumble, like the distant churning of water through a massive drain. But then it separated into layers. The slow rhythm of breath, the intermittent groan of the walls shifting, and underneath it all, a heartbeat, not mine, pounding so faintly it was almost memory instead of noise. I didn't realize my own breathing had stopped until my chest burned. The air here didn't feel like something you could survive on for long. It was too full, not with oxygen, but with intention. And then the voice came again, not from ahead, not from behind, but from inside my skull, wrapping itself around the space where thoughts should be. You will not walk out as you came in. You will not walk out at all. I didn't move for a long time, not because I was frozen in fear, though that was part of it, but because I couldn't tell what counted as moving anymore. The air inside the station had thickened. It wasn't just heavy, it pushed back. Every inhale felt like I was dragging smoke into my lungs, and every exhale sounded like it came from someone else's throat. My skin prickled like the heat before lightning, and the low, wet hum from the walls kept vibrating in my bones. When I finally shifted my weight, the floor under me flexed, not cracked, not creaked. It bowed. The rubber mat I'd stood on for years was gone. Under my boots, I could feel something that wasn't quite wood, wasn't quite stone. A surface with just enough give that it made my stomach turn. Somewhere in the dark, the radio clicked. By itself. Not the mic switch, not the tuner. Just a click, like a slow, deliberate tap on the console. Then, through the static, came voices. Not one, not many, just a few, close enough that you could hear breath between the words. Logan. It wasn't all in unison, but it wasn't entirely separate either, like different mouths sharing the same thought. I wanted to pull my hands away from the desk, but my fingertips had sunk into it. Literally. I tried to jerk them free, but the wood, if it was still wood, stretched like warm wax, clinging to my skin before letting go. My palms were wet when I pulled them back. Another sound. Not from the hallway this time. From behind the wall. A slow, steady crawl. And then I remembered something. The emergency exit. It was 15 feet to my left, past the rack of old transmitter parts. I couldn't see it from here, but I could picture it. a steel door with a latch you had to kick free. It led to the maintenance stairwell, and from there, the outside. But stepping into the outside meant stepping into them, because I could hear them now, beyond the thin layers of concrete, moving in time with my breath. And for the first time tonight, I didn't know whether leaving the station or staying inside it was the real death sentence. I stood there too long. Long enough for the sound behind the wall to change, less of a crawl now, more of a drag, like something heavy and wet being pulled across tile. The hallway light was still out, but I could see the faint glow from the on-air sign bleeding into the dark. It painted the doorway in a dull, pulsing red, and for a second, I could have sworn it dimmed in rhythm with my heartbeat. 15 feet. That's all it was to the emergency exit. I told myself I'd done harder walks, across black ice in January, through floodwater that stank of fuel, over broken glass after the last riot in town. This was no different, just one step at a time. Only, the first step wasn't a step at all. The floor slid. My boot sank half an inch, like the ground itself didn't want to let go. I yanked it free, the sound more of a suction pop than a shuffle. The hum from the walls deepened, like they were listening. I passed the rack of transmitter parts, old coils, tubes, bent aluminum plates, things I never got around to throwing away. They rattled, one by one, in no breeze I could feel. I kept moving. The dragging sound behind the wall followed my pace. 8 feet now. I could see the outline of the steel door, black against black, but I knew the shape. I reached for the latch, but stopped halfway. It was breathing. Not moving from air pressure. Breathing. Expanding and contracting in tiny pulses I could feel in my fingertips before I even touched it. The dragging stopped, and in that silence, I realized the hum wasn't in the walls anymore. It was inside me. I didn't want to put my hand on that door. Every instinct I had told me it wasn't an exit anymore, not in the way I understood exits. But the other option was staying in here, with that thing pacing me from behind the wall. The metal looked black, but when I leaned closer, I saw the faintest shimmer, like oil floating on water. My fingers hovered an inch from it, and a static prickle ran up my arm. I told myself, just push it open, get out, and it's over. But my body didn't believe me. Somewhere down the hall, something clicked. Not a sharp sound, more like a latch unfastening in slow motion. Then another, closer this time. I turned, but the hallway was empty. Or at least, it looked empty. The red glow from the on-air sign caught the edges of the walls, but the center of the corridor seemed deeper than it should have been, like it could just keep going forever if I stepped forward. I could still hear the drag, but now it was above me. Ceiling tiles shifted. Dust fell. That's when I realized I could smell it, like warm copper and something rotting in a locked room for too long. I wrapped my hand around the door latch and pressed down. It didn't budge. Not locked, not stuck, just refusing. The hum in my chest was getting louder, and I realized it wasn't just sound. It was shaping my breathing, forcing it slower, deeper, until I was almost matching its rhythm. And when I looked down, I saw that my shadow wasn't standing still anymore.